Hi, everybody. Welcome in. This is my webinar on I'm always so exhausted understanding burnout. My name is Alexa Etse. I am a registered psychotherapist qualifying and a student intern at Creating Connection. Thank you very much for joining today's webinar. This is the first part of a three-part series that explores mental exhaustion. Today, we're focusing specifically on burnout, what it is, how to recognize it, what contributes to it, and also what can help prevent it and recover from it. So, whether you're a student, a caregiver, a parent, a caregiver, helping professional, shift worker, or simply someone feeling overwhelmed by life's demands, my hope is that you'll leave today with a better understanding of burnout and also some practical tools that you could apply to your own life. We'll also be doing some interactive exercises throughout the presentation. So if you want to participate, you might want to just grab a piece of paper and a pen or something to write on or type on. Either or will work fine. And yeah, so just a few disclaimers. So this webinar is intended for educational purposes, and it's not a substitute for psychotherapy, counseling, medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment. And as I'm discussing burnout, stress, mental health, you might find that some of this resonates with you and your own experience. So I encourage you to participate in a way that feels comfortable. If you need to pause the video, step away, take a break, grab some water, or just pause and reflect or regroup, please feel free to do so. So, like I said, I am Alexa, a therapist intern at Creating Connection, also a registered psychotherapist qualifying, and I'm currently completing my graduate diploma in psychotherapy through the Université de Hearst. In my role, I support children, adolescents, and adults who might be navigating challenges like stress, anxiety, low mood, self esteem, concerns, life transitions, and other mental health difficulties. Before I came into psychotherapy, I've had opportunities working in a variety of helping and community focused roles. Like education, I was a teacher for a little bit. I also worked in child and youth services in protection, mental health and community outreach. And I also have experience working with kiddos diagnosed with autism and teaching them life skills. So, all of these experiences have allowed me to really work alongside individuals and families who are often experiencing different types of stressors and life challenges. And one of the reasons why I wanted to offer a webinar on burnout is I think it's something that affects a lot more people than we realize. Whether you're a student, caregiver, worker, parent, helping professional, someone just trying to keep up with the demands of daily life. Burnout can have a significant impact on all of our well beings. So, my hope is that today you'll leave with a better understanding of burnout, a greater awareness of the signs, and also some practical tools that you could apply in your own life. So, today we're going to talk about what burnout is and how it's different from everyday stress. We'll also look at the signs of burnout, and just some indicators that often appear when stress has been building for too long. We'll also look at some of the contributors to burnout, so like external demands, personal factors, and challenges related to recovery. We'll also look at prevention, so practical ways that you can protect your energy and reduce the likelihood of burnout developing over time. And finally, we'll also talk about recovery and strategies that can help support healing and help people move toward a more sustainable balance. And throughout the webinar, like I said, we'll be having some interactive exercises. So if you want to grab a pen and paper to participate, feel free. Okay, so before we talk about what burnout is, I think it's important to address some common misconceptions. So, one of the biggest myths is that burnout is a sign of personal weakness or failure. In reality, burnout often happens to people who care very deeply, who take on a lot of responsibility, and who push themselves very hard. In many ways, some people call it the curse of the strong. Another common myth is that burnout is solely the individual's problem to fix. So, yes, while your own personal coping strategies can absolutely help, burnout doesn't necessarily occur in an isolated vacuum. Recovery often requires changes not only at that individual level, but sometimes within families, workplaces, schools, or other systems as well. Many people also assume that burnout is simply the result of working long hours. So, yes, while your workload can certainly contribute, burnout is often more complex than that. It can develop when there's a mismatch between the demands that are placed on us and our resources, our values, and our opportunities for rest and recovery. So, some people also believe that burnout is just a price that we have to pay for being successful or high achieving. But high performance and well being are not mutually exclusive. We can pursue meaningful goals without having to sacrifice our health in the process. And finally, burnout is often associated exclusively with work. So while occupational burnout is well recognized, burnout can affect anybody: parents, caregivers, students, volunteers, any helping professional, and even just any individual really who's managing multiple responsibilities, multiple roles. All of these people can experience burnout. It's not limited to just the workplace. Okay, so what is burnout? Oftentimes, when we hear the word, many of us will think about feeling tired, but burnout is more than simply just needing a good night's sleep. Burnout tends to happen when we experience ongoing stress for a long period of time without enough opportunities to recover from that stress. Over time, our emotional, mental, and physical resources become depleted. So, people who are experiencing burnout often describe feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, emotionally drained, or disconnected from things that they once enjoyed. They may notice that the tasks that once felt manageable now require a lot more effort. Um, Burnout also doesn't happen overnight. It develops gradually over time. So it makes it easy to miss the warning signs until we're already struggling in that state of exhaustion. So, just looking at the nervous system a little bit here, um, we have two parts of our nervous system. So, we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is also referred to as the fight or flight response, and we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is referred more to the rest and restoring state. Um, so that sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, when that kicks in, what's happening is it helps us respond to challenges. It increases our alertness, it increases our energy and our focus, so that it's incredibly helpful when we need to meet a deadline, when we need to study for an exam, care for a child, or respond to an emergency. It puts us in high alert so that we can adequately assess the situation and handle it. The parasympathetic nervous system, on the other hand, it has a different role. That is kind of like the opposite. It helps us slow down, recover, digest food, sleep, restore our energy. So ideally, we are moving back and forth between those two systems throughout the day, right? We experience that stress, we're in high alert, high focus, and then we can come back down once the stress is done and recover from that. Problems can happen when we're spending long periods of time in that state of stress without enough opportunities to recover from it. So, over time, this leaves us feeling exhausted, depleted, overwhelmed, which then contributes to burnout. One way to think about it is that burnout isn't necessarily caused by the stress itself. It's caused by experiencing that stress repeatedly without opportunities for rest and recovery in the middle. Burnout happens when stress is high and opportunities for recovery stay low over an extended period of time. So, thinking like this, this is a concept called the stress cycle. So, oftentimes when we think about stress, we're focusing on the stressor itself. So, whether it's the deadline, the exam, the presentation, a difficult conversation, financial stress, the crying toddler in the back seat, the family illness, we tend to think that once that situation is over, the stress is done with also. But our bodies don't always work that way. A resolved stress cycle happens when our body has the chance to recognize that the challenge itself has passed and that it's safe to return to a state of rest and recovery. In other words, that stress gets activated, the stress response gets activated, and then deactivated. If we think about this like historically, our ancestors way back when in the day, if they encountered a threat like a bear or a lion, they might run, they might fight, they might look for safety, they might reconnect with other people, and eventually their nervous system would be able to settle. The cycle comes to a natural end. But today, a lot of our stressors don't work like that. A lot of our stress isn't just becoming face to face with a bear in the woods, although that could be an option. It's more likely that we're carrying that stress with us, right? We finish work for the day, but we go home and we're still thinking about the work. We're still thinking about our deadlines. We may solve one problem, right? We're able to help our toddler stop crying, and immediately after that, we're moving on to the next thing. We might be physically resting, right? Taking a break on the couch, but our minds are still planning ahead, worrying, anticipating the next responsibility that's going to come. So, as a result, yes, the original stressor might be gone, but that stress response is still active because we didn't have time or we didn't have an opportunity to let our body know that it's safe to deactivate that stress response. So over time, this unresolved stress cycle accumulates. The stress builds up. The body spends more time in this state of activation and less time in a state of recovery. We start carrying that stress from one day into the next day, and eventually 1 week's worth of stress into the next week, instead of being able to let it go and deactivate. So this is one of the reasons why burnout can develop. It's not necessarily one single event that causes burnout. It's the repeated experience of stress without enough opportunities to complete that stress cycle. The good news is that there are ways that we could help close that stress cycle, even if we can't get rid of the stressor itself. So things like physical movement, right? And not necessarily going to the gym for an hour, moving at all, taking a walk, stretching, things like that, deep breathing, spending time in nature, laughter and social connection, creative activities, right? Creating things, mindfulness, rest, meditation, sleep. These are all things that can help send the message to our nervous system that the stressful threat has passed and that it's safe for us to start recovering from it. So that's an important distinction because sometimes we can't always solve the stress, right? I'm thinking like financial stress. It's not always easy to just get rid of that. But we can still support our nervous system to recover from it, even if we're still experiencing it. So we don't always have control over the stressor, but we can create opportunities to complete the stress cycle. So here we're going to take a pause for a little interactive exercise. So I want you to think about the past 2 weeks. I want you to rate your overall stress on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being very low stress and 10 being extremely high stress. And what number would you give yourself? Okay, you could pause here if you need more time. And I also want you to think about your recovery. So things like sleep, rest, relaxation, enjoyable activities, social connection, anything that helps you feel recharged, whether it's physically, mentally, or emotionally, it feels like you're gaining energy back from it. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your recovery? Where 1 is very low and 10 is a lot of recovery time. You could pause here to reflect as well. I also want you to take a moment to think about those two numbers, and I want you to consider the gap that's between the two. If your stress number is really high and your recovery is also high, your system might be under pressure, but it might still be having those opportunities to recharge and recover. If your stress is low and your recovery is high, that's wonderful, right? It may suggest that the current balance that you have is working well. But if your stress is really, really high and your recovery is very low and it stays like that consistently, that gap might be important to pay attention to. Over time, when stress repeatedly exceeds recovery, it becomes harder for our bodies and our minds to keep up. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're burnt out, and it also doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. Life naturally has periods where stressful demands increase. But what this exercise here does is it helps give us a snapshot of whether our current level of recovery is keeping pace with the amount of demands that we're carrying. One of the key ideas that we'll come back to throughout this webinar is that burnout is often less about how much stress we experience and more about whether or not we have enough opportunities to recover from that stress. So, moving on, but you could keep these two numbers in mind as well. Okay, so why is burnout becoming, or why does it seem like burnout is becoming more common? I think today a lot of people are balancing multiple roles and responsibilities, right? One individual might be managing work, school, caring for children, supporting family members, maintaining all of their relationships, handling everyday tasks and responsibilities, their deadlines at work, etc., etc. At the same time, technology has made it easier for us to stay connected, but it's also made it more difficult for us to fully disconnect from our responsibilities. Notifications, emails, social media, constant access to information can create a feeling of always being on. And when our demands stay high and our opportunities for rest and recovery are limited, chronic stress begins to accumulate over time. And this is one of the reasons why burnout appears to be becoming more common. So, while burnout can affect anybody, there are certain groups that may be a little bit more at risk due to the ongoing demands that they face. So, parents, caregivers, students, helping professionals, people who spend significant time caring for other people or managing multiple responsibilities can be at a greater risk for facing higher levels of ongoing stress. And in 2023, there was a study that found that 33% of parents reported high levels of stress compared to 20% of adults who didn't have children. Also in 2024, about 1 in 5 adults reported taking time off due to stress-related mental health concerns. So these stats just kind of remind us that burnout is not personal weakness or failure. Rather, it's a natural human response that can happen when the demands that are placed on us are consistently exceeding the resources and opportunities we have to recover. All right, so now looking at the signs of burnout. So, burnout can affect us emotionally, physically, cognitively, and behaviorally. Everybody has a unique experience, but there are some common signs that people tend to report. So, on the emotional side, you might notice increased irritability, feeling emotionally drained or low motivation, feeling this sense of hopelessness or pessimism, negativity. Some people might also describe feeling numb or disconnected from their emotions. And other people might find themselves becoming more reactive than usual. On the physical side, burnout can show up as this persistent chronic fatigue that doesn't seem to improve with any amount of sleep. People might experience changes in their sleep, might have increase in headaches, muscle tension, difficulty falling or staying asleep, or also finding that they're getting sick more often, that their immune system isn't working as well as it maybe has in the past. Cognitively, burnout can make it harder to think clearly. You might notice like brain fog, a hard time concentrating, forgetting things really easy, feeling less productive than maybe you normally would. Things that once felt manageable may now require a lot more effort and energy. And on the behavioral side, people might also start withdrawing from other people, procrastinating, avoiding any responsibilities, losing interest in activities that they once really enjoyed. Some individuals also become detached from their work, their studies, their relationships, or daily routines. And one thing that I want to highlight is that burnout doesn't always look like dramatic. Sometimes it shows up in really small ways, feeling less patient with a loved one, or finding it harder to focus, putting something off that normally maybe you wouldn't. Um, and this feeling that you're just trying to get through today. I just got to get through today. So as you look at these signs, I invite you to reflect on whether any of them feel familiar, not necessarily as a way of diagnosing yourself, but as an opportunity to kind of increase your awareness of how stress might be affecting you. Another challenge with burnout is that it rarely happens overnight. It happens gradually over time. So, on the left side here, you're going to see some thoughts that many people have when they're beginning to experience stress and overload. Things like, I just need to push through, or I can rest later. It often comes from a place of responsibility and determination, wanting to meet the demands in front of us. But the problem is that when these problems continue of just pushing through, of just getting things done, putting your rest aside to get the deadline met, or whatever it may be, when these patterns continue too long without that recovery, it can contribute to burnout. Over time, these early thoughts might also start to shift. So instead of I can handle one more thing, it might start becoming I have nothing left to give. Instead of believing that the situation is temporary, it might start feeling like exhausted all the time, or overwhelmed by really small tasks. People who are experiencing burnout also might notice a shift in how they view themselves and their responsibilities. Thoughts like, nothing I do is enough, or I just don't care anymore. It can reflect that emotional exhaustion and the detachment that often comes with burnout. So, as you look at these statements, I invite you to reflect on if any of them feel familiar. Um, you don't need to share your answer with anybody, and it's not to diagnose you or anything like that, but rather to just notice if there are signs that maybe your stress levels are building and accumulating, and that maybe your mind and your body might be asking for some more support, some more rest, more recovery. So you could consider the question on the page. Which statement feels most familiar to you right now? I think what often strikes me most is that people often don't realize how much stress they're carrying until they see their own thoughts reflected back to them. So these statements here can also act as early warning signs that can help us recognize when stress might be becoming too much, and when it might be outweighing our recovery. Okay, so when we look at what contributes to burnout, it can be helpful to think about three areas. So, external demands, personal factors, and recovery factors. So, for external demands, this refers to the pressures that are coming from our environment, the life around us, right? So, it can be ongoing stress, overwhelming demands, situation where we feel like we have little control, or a lack of autonomy. might also include conflicts or difficult relationships. And these are often things that happen around us, which can make our day to day life feel more draining, right? So, like our work environment, maybe family demands and responsibilities, all the things we have to do, things that might be out of our control, that kind of stuff. In the second category, we have personal factors. So these are not necessarily to blame yourself if you have this factor. That's not what it's about. It's about noticing patterns that people develop over time in response to responsibility or pressure. So things like having difficulty setting boundaries, right? If you're struggling to place a boundary on, hey, I can't take on that extra assignment right now. If we're having difficulty there, it might make it easier for the signs of burnout to creep in. Same thing with perfectionism, high expectation for ourselves, difficulty balancing the responsibilities and personal needs. And so these patterns often come from people who care very deeply about their work or their responsibilities. It comes from people who really want to do well. But over time, when we're saying yes to everything and putting our energy in every single aspect that's asked of us, we start stretching ourselves too thin and we run out of energy. We become exhausted. And for recovery factors that contribute to burnout, this can include things like limited support, or being in a role where we're frequently caring for other people, but not having enough time or space to truly rest and recover for ourselves. So I think what's important here is to notice that burnout usually isn't caused by one single factor or one single stressful event. It can be, but it's not usually like that. It tends to develop when multiple pressures build up over time, and the opportunities for rest, for support, for recovery are not enough to balance them out, right? Your stress is up here and your recovery is down here. That gap, when that is prolonged, that's usually when burnout tends to happen. So let's look at a case study to help make this a little bit more practical. So we have Jordan. Jordan is a 38-year-old parent living in Northern Ontario. They work full-time in a demanding shift work job that often includes nights and rotating schedules. At home, Jordan has two children who are both involved in extracurricular activities, which include sports, and the sports require regular evening and weekend commitments like games and practices. Recently, Jordan's parent has also become ill, and they have taken on some extra caregiving responsibilities like attending medical appointments and helping with day to day support. So, over time, Jordan starts noticing that they're constantly tired, even on their days off. They feel like they're always behind on their responsibilities, forgetting small things, and struggling to keep up with everything. They find themselves becoming a little bit more irritable at home, less patient with their kids, and the activities that they used to enjoy now just feel like another thing on the to do list. So Jordan often thinks, I just need to get through this week, but that feeling of being overwhelmed just doesn't seem to go away. So when we're looking at Jordan's situation, which I had AI help me create, so it's not based on a real case, but it's something that could be very common. So when we look at this situation, we can start to see that the things that contribute to burnout, that we discussed, like ongoing external demands, limited recovery time, multiple caregiving roles, and very little space to rest or reset. And what's important here is that nothing in Jordan's situation is unusual or is wrong, right? Many people might actually see themselves in parts of this story. Burnout in this context is not about not coping well. It's about how quickly life demands can accumulate when multiple roles and responsibilities overlap without enough time for recovery. And as you listen to this, you might notice that burnout often makes sense in this context. It's not something that appears out of nowhere. It builds gradually as responsibilities increase and the time available for rest decreases. So how do we help prevent burnout? What are some things that we can do what are some things that we can build into our routines to make burnout less likely to happen? Um, it's important to think of this less about doing more and thinking of it as protecting your energy and creating space for recovery. So the strategies on this slide are not meant to be another set of tasks that you have to complete. It's possible ways that can help your system stay balanced over time, help your system recover from that stress. So things like setting and maintaining boundaries is important. Boundaries help us recognize what is sustainable and what might be adding more to our plate than we can realistically carry. Related to this is building in rest and recovery before that exhaustion hits. So before we reach the point of exhaustion, we should have, or it would be nice to have some things built into our routine where we have moments of recovery. Um, so it should be part of everyday life, especially when demands are ongoing, and rest and recovery can look different for everybody. Stress regulation strategies, so things like breathing exercises, grounding techniques, mindfulness, meditation, these are all things that can help support our nervous system in those moments of activation. So these tools are not necessarily about eliminating or getting rid of the stress. It's about helping the body and our mind return to a more manageable state. Other important supports like asking for help when needed and intentionally stepping away from our demands. So, whether that means like work, school, caregiving responsibilities, or technology, but taking a pause, right? And taking a pause isn't a luxury, it's what allows us to continue functioning adequately over time. Also, reframing unhelpful expectations is also important. Many people who experience burnout hold very high standards for themselves. So, shifting from like everything needs to be perfect towards good enough can be enough, right? It can reduce some of that internal pressure that contributes to the overload. And it's also important to engage in activities that bring enjoyment or a sense of purpose. So, like, prioritize responsibilities realistically instead of perfectly. So, that often means recognizing that we can't do everything at the same level all the time, right? We cannot give 100% effort every single minute of every day. It's simply not possible. That's not how our bodies were made to work. We need to take time where we could lower that expectation and not give all of we have, right? Taking a step back and being like, I have 5% effort to give right now. And that's okay because it's enough. Good enough is enough, right? Overall, burnout prevention is not about eliminating the stress in your life. Stress is a normal part of living. We're not going to be able to escape it. The goal is to ensure that those periods of stress are also balanced with recovery, with support, with flexibility, so that they don't accumulate over time and lead to that exhaustion. Okay, great. So let's look at what prevention might look like for Jordan. So these are not meant to be like a checklist of things Jordan absolutely has to implement in their life or that they have to do perfectly. Instead, they're examples of possibilities, small adjustments that could help reduce pressure and create more space for recovery time. Everybody might choose different strategies, right? Not everything's going to be realistic for every single person's life. So it's important to try and find prevention strategies that work for you. So for Jordan, it might be setting limits during already full weeks, saying no to extra shifts, avoiding additional commitments when their schedule is already stretched. It might include very small recovery moments throughout the day. Maybe like taking 10 to 15 minutes after work or after a shift before immediately jumping into that parenting role or jumping into their chores or jumping into caregiving responsibilities. Another possibility is sharing practical tasks and responsibilities. So arranging like carpooling for activities, or like having a partner or someone who can support you take over a consistent routine, like bedtime with kids or things like that. And at home, prevention might also involve lowering our expectations during high demand periods. Not everything needs to be done perfectly all the time, right? We can allow things to be good enough and to reduce that pressure that we feel internally. Jordan might also protect an evening per week. So, keeping one evening per week with no commitments, and make sure that days after their shifts include actual recovery time instead of immediately filling them with tasks. So, making space and time for rest and recovery. And again, these are just examples of what prevention could look like. The goal is not to add to an already full plate, but to create small points of relief throughout the day and throughout the week so that your stress doesn't continue to accumulate and carry over without being able to deactivate. So, when we think about burnout recovery, it can be helpful to think of it as a process instead of like a single step or a quick fix. The first step is simply noticing that something feels off, something feels unsustainable. I can't keep doing this at this level forever, right? And for many people, this is the hardest part because burnout often builds gradually over time and people become used to pushing through it, right? I've been pushing through it for 3 weeks. I should be able to keep pushing through it. But the reality is our bodies are not meant to consistently and permanently push through stress like that. Recovery often involves creating space between yourself and the source of stress when it's possible. Um, so it doesn't always mean removing the stress completely, but maybe finding small ways to step back or take a pause from work, reducing work demands or caregiving demands, whatever it may be, whatever's possible with the situation that you're in. Another important part of recovery is returning to basic needs. So when you're burnt out, um, sleep, nutrition, rest, physical health, all of these things often get pushed aside, right? They're the first things to be like, oh, I can do that later. I'll do it another time. I don't have time for it now, right? They're easily pushed aside. So rebuilding those foundations becomes essential. From that point, recovery might involve reducing demands where possible and reconnecting with what actually matters to you, your values, your priorities, the things that feel meaningful. And finally, recovery often includes making small adjustments, or any adjustments really. They can be small or they can be significant adjustments that help restore a more sustainable balance between what is required, what is demanded of you, and what you can realistically carry and what you realistically have to give. So let's look at some concrete strategies. I think one of the most important ones is reaching out for support, letting people know, or the people close to you know what you're going through, and seeing if there are ways that they could support you. And also being specific about what you might need. It might involve asking someone for help with a specific task, or just letting people know, the people around you know that what you're currently able to do or what you're currently able or not able to do, or not able to take on at this time. Self compassion is also a very important part of recovery. Burnout often comes with a lot of self criticism and self blame, like a feeling like you should be coping better or you should be doing more. So, recovery involves shifting that towards a more understanding and less critical way of relating to yourself. This can also be done like treating yourself as you would a friend, which I'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide. Also, basic routines like sleep, rest, nutrition, these all become especially important because burnout is emotional and physical exhaustion. Gentle movement, right? It doesn't need to be an hour at the gym, just simply going for a short walk or doing a stretch a mini stretch session in your house. Maybe participating in yoga or yoga at home. Just moving your body, even if it's slowly, is still moving your body. And it can also help support your nervous system without necessarily adding extra strain to your life. A lot of people also benefit from slowly reintroducing small, enjoyable, or meaningful activities, not as a pressure to, I need to be more productive, I need to do more things, I need to do self care, not necessarily as that pressure, but as a way of reconnecting with the parts of your life that feel grounding or that feel restorative, right? Finding a way to reconnect with the parts of your life that bring you energy instead of only giving your energy away. Stress regulation strategies, things like breathing, grounding, journaling, these are all ways that can support moments of overwhelm as you're going through recovery. And finally, for many people, seeking professional help can be an important part of the recovery process, especially when burnout feels persistent or difficult to manage alone. Having that professional help, professional support, and like an outside look can also really help support you in those moments. I would also like to take a quick look at some stress management strategies a little bit closer. So the first one is box breathing, which you may have heard of before. It's a simple but pretty powerful breathing technique that can help regulate your body's stress response. So when we're stressed or anxious, our breathing often becomes faster and shallower, which signals to our body that something is wrong. So intentionally slowing and regulating our breathing can help support the body's natural relaxation response. Basically, what box breathing is you inhale through your nose for a count of 4 seconds, and then you're going to hold it for 4 seconds, and then you're going to exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds, and then hold it again for 4 seconds. So it's called box breathing because it's 4 4 4 4. I think it's pretty easy to remember that one. It can be used during stressful moments themselves, or it could also be practiced regularly as a way to build stress management into your daily life and your daily routines. Another one is forest therapy. So I think a lot of people know that just spending time outside and outdoors feels good. Forest therapy kind of takes this a step further. So by intentionally engaging with nature using all of our senses. So maybe instead of focusing on destination or getting exercise, the goal is more to slow down and pay attention to what you're hearing, pay attention to what you can see and smell and feel in your environment and being more present in that outdoor space. Research also shows that spending time in nature can reduce stress, improve mood, and help people feel more grounded and present. Um, for many of us, I think being outdoors just naturally shifts our attention away from worrying about the future or replaying the past to being in the moment. And also, you don't need a formal program to benefit from forest therapy. Even just a mindful walk outside can be a great place to start. But there are like designated services for forest therapy specifically. The next one is Yoga Nidra, I believe is how it's pronounced. Sometimes it's also called yogic sleep. So, unlike traditional yoga, there aren't necessarily any poses or movements involved. Most people practice it by laying down and listening to a guided meditation. So, the goal with this one is to enter a deeply relaxed state while remaining aware and present. And research also shows that yoga nidra might also help reduce stress, improve sleep quality, and support overall relaxation. Also, people who struggle to sit still and sit quietly find this meditation approach a bit more accessible because you're following a guided voice and it might allow you to relax a little bit better than if you were sitting in silence. If this is something that interests you, there are many free recordings available online. I'm sure, just like a Google search, YouTube search, I'm sure there's lots on there. There's also an app called Insight Timer, which has a lot of free meditations and guided meditations as well. It's a really great app. I highly recommend it if you're interested in meditation and mindfulness. Next is self compassion breaks. So many people experiencing burnout are very hard on themselves, and there's often this feeling of they should be doing more, they should be coping better, they should be managing everything perfectly. So a self compassion break involves pausing and responding to yourself with that same kindness that you would offer a friend who is struggling, right? If a friend came up to you and said, I'm exhausted all the time. It doesn't matter how much work I get done. There's a never ending list of work. I'm exhausted. I can't do this anymore. Right? Your response wouldn't be, or your response most likely is not, well, you should be handling all of this. You should be doing this perfectly. You've been doing it for 3 months. Why can't you do it anymore? Right? That's not often how we respond. Often it's that sounds really difficult, right? Taking a moment and recognizing stress is a part of being human. This is a natural response to how much stress and how much demands are on your plate. What do I need in this moment? What do I need to help move through this? It might feel unfamiliar at first, but self compassion can reduce stress, and it can also reduce emotional exhaustion while also improving your resilience and your well being. The last strategy is an energy audit. It's one of my favorites because it's pretty relevant for burnout. So, burnout recovery isn't just about reducing your stress, it's about understanding what takes your energy and what helps you restore that energy. So, let's just jump right into an energy audit. Let's practice it. Okay, so on a piece of paper, or whatever you like. If you have a phone that you're typing on or a laptop that you're typing on, that works too. And you can make 2 columns or 2 paragraphs. So the first one is what drains my energy. And the second column is what helps me recharge, what restores my energy. So for the next few minutes, I want you to think about the people, the activities, the responsibilities, situations, or habits that tend to leave you feeling depleted or exhausted, overwhelmed or emotionally drained. And you could write those down. If you need more time, you could feel free to pause the video. Then I want you to think about all the things that help you feel recharged, the things that help you feel grounded and calm and connected and energized. And remember that there's no right or wrong answers. What drains one person's energy might be perfectly manageable for somebody else, and what restores one person's energy might not work for someone else. For example, some common energy drains include things like constant multitasking, conflict, overcommitment, lack of sleep, excessive screen time, caregiving responsibilities, or feeling responsible for everybody else's needs. And some examples of restorative activities might be spending time in nature, exercising, reading, connecting with supportive people, listening to music, creative hobbies, quiet time alone, prayer or spirituality, or simply just getting enough quality sleep. And as you're doing this activity, try and be honest with yourself. Sometimes we discover that the things that we've come to accept as normal are actually taking a significant toll on our energy. So you can go ahead and try that activity. And once you're finished, I'd like you to notice a few things. Which column was easier to complete? Are there any energy drains that surprised you? You weren't expecting them to be there? Are there any restorative activities that you haven't made time for recently? Right? Think of the hobbies that maybe have been neglected over the years. Is there one drain that you could reduce, even just slightly? Or is there a restorative activity that you could intentionally add back into your week this week? And remember, the goal isn't to get rid of every single source of stress around us. That's usually not realistic. Stress is a part of being human. But instead, it's more about becoming intentional about protecting our energy and creating opportunities for that restoration. And sometimes small changes, repeated consistently, can make a meaningful difference over time. I have also put together a mini burnout toolkit resource for everybody who's joined today. You should be able to access it by scanning the QR code, but I think there should also be a link in the description of this video. So the toolkit contains various worksheets to help you better understand burnout and your personal warning signs, and also develop practical strategies that support your well-being. So there's about 10 pages in it. There's an energy audit like we had just practiced. There's also like a mini stress and recovery assessment quiz to better understand how your energy is being used. There's also a quick reference guide to different coping strategies and breathing techniques that can help complete that stress cycle and also regulate your stress. And also a personal burnout prevention plan that you could see here on the screen, to help you implement more opportunities for recovery in your daily life. And there's a couple few worksheets in there as well. And you can use it however you want. If you want to do it all in one shot, you can do that. If you want to use it more as like a resource to check in with yourself every week, or like a routine to check in on your energy levels, that can also work as well. Okay, so we're getting to the end here. And I just want to leave you with a few key takeaways. So, first, burnout is more than just feeling tired, it's a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion that can develop when stress remains really high and opportunities for recovery remain low. Second, burnout rarely happens overnight. It often develops gradually, which means that recognizing early warning signs can help us intervene before we reach a crisis point. So, being aware of our own personal warning signs is really important. Another important takeaway is that stress is not the enemy. It's a normal part of life. What often contributes to burnout is experiencing that stress without enough recovery, support, or opportunities to recharge your energy. Also, prevention is often a lot easier than recovery. So, building some of these strategies into your daily routines before reaching burnout, to prevent it, is often easier than recovering from burnout. Um, Small things like setting boundaries, asking for help, adjusting expectations, or creating intentional moments for rest, those can make a meaningful difference over time. And also, I just want to express that if you are experiencing burnout, recovery is possible. Burnout is not a sign that you failed. It's often a signal that you've been working so hard for so long that now something in your life needs attention. Something needs support or adjustment, and often it's your energy. It's what you um, need to focus a little bit more on prioritizing and protecting. So my hope is that today's webinar has helped you better understand burnout, recognize signs, and identify at least one small step that you can take to better practice and protect your energy and well-being. And before we finish, I would like to open the floor for any questions. If you guys have comments and you want to interact with this video, please feel free to do so below. And what is one thing that stood out to you in today's presentation, or what is something that you might want to try this week or implement into your daily routine? And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our team. And thank you so much for watching today. The email on the screen here is where you can reach us if you have any questions. And I also just want to let everybody know that, again, this was part one of a 3-part series on mental exhaustion. So if you are interested in learning more on mental exhaustion, on July 23rd at 12 p.m., I will be doing a webinar on information overload. So talking about things like social media, doom scrolling, um, things like that, just the amount of information that we consume on a day-to-day basis and how it contributes to mental exhaustion. And then the week after, on July 30th, I will be doing a webinar on carrying too much, understanding the mental load and overthinking. So that one is more focused on like your day-to-day things of remembering everything, planning ahead, anticipating, worrying, and also getting stuck in overthinking loops. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. And I hope I can see you join us for the next webinars in the series. And I wish you all the best and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.